In September 1983, the future seemed bright for Tammy Oldham Ashcraft. She and her fiancé, Richard Sharp, had been sailing for the past 6 months. They had decided to take break from pleasure sailing in Sharp's 36-foot sailboat and instead take job delivering 44-foot yacht from Tahiti to San Diego. What at first seemed like good business decision for couple as much in love with sailing as they were with each other soon became nightmare. 23-year-old Tammy, played by Shailene Woodley in the film, was left alone after one of the worst hurricanes in history hit 3 weeks into their trip and took her fiancé from her. Ambushed by the weather, late-season storm, the yacht pitch-poled and flipped end over end. Along with her fiancé Sharp, played by Sam Claflin, Ashcraft fought to keep the yacht from sinking. They battled 40-foot waves and 140-knot winds as they tried to run north of Hurricane Raymond. While they desperately battled against the Category 4 hurricane, it showed no signs of abating. Then Hurricane Raymond changed direction, stalking them like prey. The key difference between the movie and real life: the trailer for the movie, the aptly named Adrift, shows all of this. It shows the yacht capsizing after Hurricane Raymond hits. It shows Sharp injured. And it shows Ashcraft in charge of getting them home. The movie is based on the true story taken from the book Oldham wrote years afterwards called Red Sky in Morning. True story of love, loss and survival at sea. But real life, as it often is, was much more harrowing. When the hurricane hit, Sharp insisted Ashcraft get down below deck as he secured himself with the safety harness. There were screams. Ashcraft heard Sharp shout, "Oh my God!" And then there was darkness. Ashcraft was knocked out when the boat capsized, throwing her against the cabin wall. When she woke up 27 hours later, she ventured above deck to find the storm was over, but that wasn't the end of her suffering. Scrambling onto the deck, she saw Sharp's safety line dangling off the boat. Her husband, to be, was gone. Ashcraft believes the wind and waves were too powerful for her fiancé, yanking him from the tether and sweeping him overboard. She was left alone, scared and grappling with her heartbreak and loss. Definitely the hardest part was dealing with Richard being gone. She said years later to the Chicago Tribune, "There were times didn't even want to live anymore because didn't know how was going to go on. Was never going to fall in love again." This isn't the same as the Adrift trailer. When Ashcraft wakes up in the movie, she finds Sharp injured but still alive and in the water. While he's unable to help his fiancée navigate their way home, he does remain by her side. As the movie isn't out yet, it's unclear whether Sharp is actually there or figment of Ashcraft's imagination. In real life, everything was broken, smashed and scattered. The cabin was half full of water. The masts were broken clear off and the sails were waterlogged and floated useless nearby. Ashcraft investigated further and found the navigation system and the emergency position, indicating radio device, were broken. Alone, scared and injured, she didn't have time to grieve. What happened in the next 41 days was equally inspirational and heartbreaking. Mental breakdown and the inner voice. Ashcraft rigged makeshift sail from broken pole and fashion pump to keep the cabin from flooding. Left with only sextant, navigational instrument, and watch to help her navigate the 1,500 miles to Hilo, Hawaii. She suffered not just from hunger but also head injury and severely damaged boat. To this day, she wears triangular-shaped sextant, encrusted with diamond, as pendant as it reminds her of how she got home. "It saved my life," she said. In 2003 interview with Chicago Tribune, Ashcraft explained how she survived on peanut butter and canned food from fruit cocktail to sardines for 41 days after the hurricane hit. She had no time to grieve, intent and focused on her survival and getting home. Ashcraft sailed the wreck to land using the sextant, her hair matted with salt water and only her own thoughts to keep her going. She was on verge of mental breakdown. The body can endure far more than the mind. Mourning her fiancé and weak from her own blood loss, she was catatonic for 2 days. She didn't eat. She didn't move. Then the inner voice in her head demanded she get up, that she get to work. Being on that boat was like solitary confinement, she recalled. The voice kept me on track. Just followed it. For the next few days she got her bearings and rigged her sail to get herself in position so she could use currents she hoped would take her to Hawaii. While was in the survival mode, the grief was fairly low. She told the Tribune later. It wasn't as intense as when got to shore and the survival was over. And could see people together and everything. Kept reminding me of him. Just really had hard time. But that survival instinct while at sea just kicked in. It helped me to focus, to keep myself on track. Every day at midday, she looked through the sextant's telescope and adjusted it to measure the sun's angle above the horizon. She worked out her ship's latitude using nautical maps. She became her own captain. She had plan. That's not to say her journey was without trial. Ashcraft wrote. On the horizon saw an isolated cloud-like shape. The mass became granite, colored smudge in front of me. Could it be Hawaii? Was afraid to see people again, get back into society. What was going on? The next day it seemed her mind had played tricks on her. There was no island. The plane she thought she saw above her didn't see her. She heard voice. I was mentally fried. Needed guidance and the voice was real phenomenon. 3 times it was audible externally. I've asked the voice to come back, but never heard from it again. Drained and unsure if she'd ever see land, Ashcraft began to consider doing the unthinkable. She took rifle that was on board, loaded it and put it in her mouth, but the voice she had been hearing convinced her to stop. While some have questioned whether it was God, Ashcraft believes it was her inner strength, her own inner voice. Days later, 300-foot Japanese research ship saw her boat near the entrance of the harbor. More than 40 days later from when the hurricane had struck, she finally pulled into the Big Island's Hilo harbor. She cried tears of joy. Her mother's premonition back home something strange was happening. After the hurricane had hit Ashcraft's mother Zana Pennell, home in San Diego, thousands of miles away, began having weird dreams. She told the San Diego Union-Tribune she saw a guy outside on boat looking through porthole. It was blurry. Saw Tammy and she had something red on her head gash. Whether it was mother's intuition or something else, Pennell immediately felt something was wrong. With her daughter, she began visiting the Coast Guard office every day, asking about where her daughter was. She heard nothing about the hurricane. She only heard from Ashcraft 2 months after she had set sail. Life after the hurricane. Amazingly, Ashcraft still loves to sail and is 100-ton licensed captain with more than 50,000 offshore miles under her belt. Part of her ability to move on was thanks to writing her story down. She never underwent counseling, saying no one ever suggested it, though she was left wishing someone had. I definitely had some severe post-traumatic stress syndrome, she said. I really wish had taken the time to do that. For 6 years afterwards, she couldn't read book thanks to the head trauma. She couldn't focus on the words. They leapt off the page at her. She suffered from nightmares too. And she developed fear of flying. I had nightmares about being back out at sea, lost, she told the San Diego Union-Tribune. Years later, she dreamt about Richard, so she kept moving, trying to forget. 8 years after the accident she began to heal. It's clear Ashcraft has never forgotten Sharp, but he doesn't haunt her and instead reminds her that life is worth living. Years after her accident, she took the ring he had given her in Tahiti, attached it to Rose and put it out to sea. She began to read again and then, encouraged by her mother, began to write down what happened. Ashcraft jotted it all down, on napkins, legal tablets, anything she could get her hands on. She went on to pen the book that inspired Adrift the movie. 10 years on, she met another man with captivating blue eyes at dance. She went on to marry him and have 2 children. The family live on San Juan Island, where Ashcraft can be at peace with what she went through. Her children didn't read the book when it was released. They were too young. But they knew Mommy was in hurricane. It's in the past. After the hurricane hit, after Oldham tries to drag herself from the pit of despair, plagued with thoughts of suicide, there's point where she steels herself for what's to come. If was going to live, let's get to living, that inner voice told her. It's an adage she continues to live by.